Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Nick Kroger, and today we're going to be talking about a topic doesn't have as much stigma as it did maybe years ago, and I am so grateful it's more freely talked about, and it's addiction. And today we have a wonderful guest with us that knows kind of both sides of that coin, and it's Samir Vergara,
That is
and
correct.
the certified addiction counselor with First Orlando Counseling Center. Samir, thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
We were talking before we went on camera, and I think viewers might be interested to know a little bit about what led you to do what you're doing now.
Right.
There's always a pathway and with a purpose. So.
There is. Well, I was just mentioning to you a couple of seconds ago, I came to work as an addiction counselor basically by weird circumstances. I used to be not in recovery, but in addiction.
Right.
And I used to have issues with addiction, specifically in the terrain of alcohol and drugs. And I was working in South America as an actor, a television actor, soap operas. And I hit a bottom in 1998. And then after that, I came to know the Lord, and slowly but surely, the Lord took me to a place where he said, I want you to help other people that are struggling with these issues. So 14 years later, here I am, a certified addiction counselor working at First Orlando Counseling Center. We have a famous saying in recovery, you're not responsible for your disease, but you are responsible for your recovery. Some of the most normal things is usually there'll be some sort of family reunion, there'll be a party or something like that. And this is the kind of person who's always around the bar. He's right next to the bar. He's, he always has a drink in his hand. Before the party even starts, he's already thinking about drinking. He might have a couple of drinks at home. Or it's someone who, like on weekends, they're just waiting for Friday to come. That's, it's funny because I know a lot of people like that, and I used to be like that, where you live for Friday.
Right.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but as soon as Friday comes, thank God it's Friday, and your whole life, or that person's life, revolves around alcohol. Everything that he does, whether he goes to a party or he goes to a brunch on a Sunday or anything, it can be anything, but that person's life is ultimately consumed by drinking. So people can usually tell. Unfortunately, a lot of times people think, oh, I'm just socially drinking.
Right.
But when you are drinking one too many drinks too often, you got to ask yourself, is this really socially drinking, or am I starting to become an alcoholic? So it's something only that person can answer. Exactly. That's what we call a periodic.
Okay.
So they will not drink in 6 months, but when they do drink, everything breaks loose.
Right.
So what they have not done in 6 months, it happens in that night. They get a DUI, or they get in a fight with the wife, or the wife gets in a fight with the husband, or they don't show up to work the next day, or they get fired. So everything breaks loose in that one night. I mean, nothing has happened for 6 months, but when they do pick up and they drink, so that's something you have to look at also, that person. Unfortunately, alcoholism and drug addiction and whatnot, the characteristic of it is it's cunning, it's powerful, it's baffling, and it's insidious. And that means that it works differently in each person. I've known people that literally, they've had 2 DUIs in 3 years, and they've only drank twice in those 3 years. And the 2 times that they drank, they got a DUI. So that kind of, shows you how cunning this thing can be. No one wants to admit that they're an addict or an alcoholic. I think it's one of the hardest things. Most people will fight that concept with a vengeance. And
why do you think that is?
Because it's hard to accept that you have gotten to a place where you're at the end of the road, where you cannot use successfully anymore. A lot of people start and they can use successfully for a little while. In other words, they can keep the job and they can show up on time and they can still be a good husband, but it gets to a point where it's not working anymore. And For a lot of people, addiction, alcoholism, it's become their best friend. So when you have to give that up and you have to say goodbye to your best friend, what am I going to do now? How am I going to wake up in the morning? How am I going to function throughout the day at work? What am I going to do at weekends? You know, these boring long weekends, how am I going to get through them? I mean, if I can't have a drink, if I can't smoke this, if I can't do that. So it's very hard. I consider it almost like parting from a mate that you've had for years.
Right.
And you're finally saying, you know, goodbye, I cannot be with you anymore. And it hurts very much. It's very deep. That's why a lot of people, the best thing they can do is get professional help.
Right.
Don't try to do this on your own. Get professional help. There's 12-step meetings. There's good counselors. There's good counseling centers. We have the Lord. So there's so many things that we can do to actually beat this. It is, and the beauty about it, like, for example, where I work, we have something called Celebrate Recovery, and it's a 12-step program, and it's a wonderful program, not only to stop, but stay stopped. Because a lot of people can stop. Anyone can stop anything for, any addiction can be stopped. I can stop for 2 hours.
Right.
I can stop for today. I can stop for tomorrow. But what about staying stopped? What about month after month not going back to that particular addiction? That's where you really see the change. And that's where you'll see the benefits of recovery. And Celebrate Recovery, 12-step programs, we have tons of them. Not only in Orlando, but in the United States and around the world. A good thing would be to get a good counselor. If he's certified in addictions, even better, someone who understands what addiction is really about. And get a support group. You know, there's a lot of group therapy. But this is the process of recovery. A lot of people don't understand that the addiction is a disease.
Right.
You don't say to someone who has cancer, well, you know, just come by every once in a while
Right.
and we'll take a look at how you're doing and, you know, just, you know, call me if anything happens. No, you treat this person. You have them see several doctors, their nutrition, exercise, what kind of food are you going to eat. Addiction is just like that. It's holistic. We have to heal the body,
Right.
the mind, the spirit, the soul. So we have to tackle all these areas if we want true recovery. I always tell people when you start getting high, you're here in the middle. And every time you get high, you go up. But then you pass the middle and you go a little bit more down.
Yeah.
And then you go less up and more down, less up and more down, to the point where you're all the way down here. And if you get high, it'll just bring you to the middle. You're not even going to pass that anymore. Therapy, there's something called a 4th step that people do in recovery, which is a moral inventory. And when you do a moral inventory, you start to look deep inside to see what is it that makes you tick. There's a lot of things. You know, in my case, you know, it was connected to a lot of other issues.
Right.
But everybody's case is a little bit different. Once you find the root, then you can truly heal. It's like when you're going to get a tree or some weeds out of your house that you're uncomfortable with. If you don't get to the root, sooner or later it'll sprout up again. So it's the same thing. Everybody's is different, but make no mistake, the first thing that people have to do is stop using.
Right.
You cannot get to the root if you're still getting high. It's impossible.
Right.
Or if you're still acting out. So before anything happens, you must be abstinent. And that's the hard part.
Exactly.
You know, some people want to go to the root and they're still getting high. It doesn't work. Sooner or later, you'll go back to getting high. So once you stop using, then you can start looking around with a clear mind and saying, okay, so this is what makes me tick. This is where this comes from. Maybe I have some issues from my childhood, maybe some issues as a teenager. Maybe I had this happen to me when I was growing up.
Right.
And you start seeing those things and how these things contributed. But once you become an addict and you have this issue, in the end, the problem that got you there doesn't even matter anymore.
Right.
That's the irony of it.
Right.
Now you're just encompassed in this issue.
Well,
I can't do this. I can't spend another night at a shelter. I can't walk the streets anymore and panhandle. You know, and they finally come to that conclusion where they say, you know what? I need help. I want help. The prodigal son.
Yeah.
I'm coming home.
Yeah.
You know, I cannot stay here anymore and do what I'm doing. You know, I have someone who wants to help me and is willing to help me. What am I doing here living like this?
Yeah.
And that's when that little bulb turns on and that person seeks the help, and it's beautiful.